Go ahead.
So thank you very much. Yes, dear colleagues and friends, welcome to our ICOS online lecture, a new edition of it. And welcome also on behalf of Katalin Resegi, our president, who is prevented from, yes, she's with us, she's joining us, but only silently because she's after a tooth extraction and is not able to speak. So best wishes to her and all the best for a quick recovery. Yes, our online lectures are devoted to different fields of onomastics. We invite always distinguished scholars in these various fields of onomastics to report on their recent research in these fields. And this time, Kohei, hello. And this time, the field is cartography. Cartography with a focus on the Hungarian National Atlas or the series of Hungarian National Atlases. And it's really interesting to see that Hungary is perhaps the country of Europe or even on the globe with the highest frequency of national atlases after the Second World War. So already at the end of the Second World War in 1945, the first national atlas was published by András Ronay, which was called Atlas of Central Europe, but it can be regarded, I think, as a national atlas of Hungary, as the first after the Second World War. And then in 1967, in the communist period, the National Atlas of Hungary, a very comprehensive work, a very large volume, was published by Sándor Rádó. And then at the end of the communist period, but in a rather liberal political environment already in 1989, the Academy of Sciences edited a next Hungarian National Atlas under editor-in-chief Márton Bécsi, and László Bassa, for instance, was one of the managing editors, one of the co-editors. And this this comprehensive volume, again published in 1989, was later supplemented by individual issues, by supplementary issues in the early 90s, again edited by editor-in-chief Márton Bécsi and his editorial team. And now a new atlas has been published or is going to be published in 4 volumes under editor-in-chief Károly Kocsis from the Hungarian Academy of Sciences, and Gábor Gercsák, our speaker today, is a member of the editorial team, and he is responsible for place naming, for the use of place names in this atlas, and he will report on this issue during his lecture. 4 volumes of this atlas are to be published. 2 are already published. Volume 2, it is on the natural environment. It was published in 2018. And volume 3 on society, it was published in 2021. Volume 1 was not yet published. It is titled "The Hungarian State and Its Place in the World." And perhaps Hungary has not yet completely defined, not finally defined its place in the world, and therefore it may be delayed or maybe edited not as a next volume or even as the last volume, perhaps. Volume 4 is devoted to economy. All of these atlas volumes are published in a digital format and in a hard copy version, in Hungarian and in Indian and English version. And it is an atlas not only focused on Hungary, on the Republic of Hungary, but on the wider Pannonian or Carpathian Basin, so to say. This is a very typical aspect of this atlas. So it has many island maps showing just Hungary, the state of Hungary, but also very many maps embracing the whole Pannonian Basin, the wider region, so to say. And this is also a very interesting aspect as regards place name use. So which place names are used for other countries outside Hungary, for instance. I think it is also worth to be mentioned that national atlases are not only conveying information. They are also representing a certain country. They are conceived as representing a certain country. They are images of self of a certain country, or they show how a country wants to be seen by the outside world, so to say. And also under this aspect, place naming, the use of place names is a very indicative issue. So our presenter today is Gábor Gercsák, as I mentioned already, and welcome to him, a cordial welcome to him. And he just some words on his biography. He teaches at the Eötvös Loránd University in Budapest at the Department of Cartography and Geoinformatics. He's also a member of the United Nations group of experts on geographical names, and he took part in this virtual meeting in 21, in the second new meeting of Angegen. His research focuses on cartography and geography and languages, with a strong focus on place names. And he was, as I mentioned already, responsible for the use of place names in the new Hungarian National Atlas. He has 195 publications, not a small number, and mainly in the field of cartography, but also, and perhaps toponomastics is a part of cartography also. In toponomastics, for instance, a later publication is on dual naming as a mechanism to recognize multiple identities. And he mentions Casablanca or Dar el Baida as a local name of Casablanca. So let us start perhaps with the lecture now without any further ado. And please, Gábor, you have the floor. Please.
Okay. Thank you very much for your kind words and introduction, not only to me, but also to the presentation. So I am not going to repeat everything you said, because you said quite a lot about the National Atlas of Hungary. Now I am sharing the screen. Oh, correct?
Yes, we can see it. Thank you.
Now you can see it. Okay. Just move a bit away. So the principles of naming, but I will also talk about the practices of naming or labeling the names in the National Atlas series of Hungary. Here I put on several dates. The first one from 1967, as Peter said, the first National Atlas. I will also introduce you shortly to the names policy in that atlas, if there was any. And I will go on to the 89 edition. And again, shortly, that will be illustrated with a few maps as well, or map extracts. Then those two from 2009 and 11 are the so-called pre-national atlases, which were a kind of forerunners of the new national atlas that has been published since 2018, and now we are just in the middle of it. I was told a few days ago that the third volume will come out in autumn this year, both in English and in Hungarian as separate volumes. Well, the changing principles of the place name use. Here you can see the cover page, the outer cover of the national atlases that you might remember. Here I summed up the here I summed up the principles of these publications. I organized them into 3 blocks. The first 2 blocks followed almost the same policy to label and to use the place names. In the second block, again, basically the same rules, but different from the first group, while in the third group, which is along there, the newest one, is completely different, or is very much different from the former ones, because there is an important statement at the very, very bottom that Hungarian names are also shown in the English language edition if the minority's share is over 10%. This minority is only the Hungarian minority. We didn't deal with other minorities in these national atlases. The letters on the left, the EN, of course, refers to the English language, AGU to the Hungarian language publication. I will add map extracts from these areas just to show you how it really appeared, how the principles were put into maps. First, 1967, the chief editor was Sándor Radó, and the older generation might remember him. I remember him as my first boss in my life. When I was 23, I was his, as he liked saying, academic assistant. As for the 1989 edition, I was already contributing to it, first of all with the translations. I will give you some translation mistakes or inconsistencies in that atlas as well. A summary of the two editions, I highlighted in yellow the two sentences, which means that they are really related to this meeting. Unfortunately, there were no notes on place names. There were no explanations on the principles. What I know about the principles is that I can deduce from the maps by carefully studying those publications. The system of using place names or labeling them is that local names policy, that is endonyms all over, outside Hungary as well, and Hungarian exonyms were shown for historical Hungary only, but not always. Let me add that the 1967 edition was only in Hungarian, while the other one from 89, the maps had their title and legend in English as well, but in annex they, I might say we, but rather they added a long description or explanation to the maps in English as well. However, the map content and the names in the map were all in Hungarian. Well, the following examples will justify what I say. This is the northwest of and from Hungary, Austria, and at that time Czechoslovakia, where you see that the principle that the local names or endonyms should be put on the first place, while a Hungarian name either on historical Hungary or because the name is widely known in Hungary in Hungarian, like Bécs for Wien or Pozsony for Bratislava. On the right, the main difference is not in the name use, but in the quality of the maps. So the 89 edition was cartographically much better executed. That was really at a high level. It's interesting that the 67 edition was made in the high time of the Hungarian socialist communist system, while the one from 89 was made in the last month of the former political system. these two facts really make these national atlases very important for those who study Hungary's past or Hungary's geography or Hungary's economy or the place names, how we dealt with place names in the past. As for the northeastern part of Hungary and the neighboring countries, you see that the place names always followed the same idea, that the endonym first and the Hungarian name below in rounded brackets or parentheses, but the natural physical features were all given in Hungarian. Note that the hills names, mountain names, region names were also given in Hungarian, but the annex in English gave it in English. And in many cases, it was impossible for the foreign readers to identify the English name on the Hungarian map. An interesting addition was in the 89 map that it already included a larger scale map of Central Europe, including the parts of Romania. Here I show you the eastern part of Transylvania, which is in fact running, the former border on the Carpathian Mountains, and the area to the east in Moldova or Moldavia or Moldova, where lots of settlement names and also other feature names have their Hungarian forms as well. It's interesting that Bako, Roman, and Târgu Neamț, they all have a Hungarian name, well-known Hungarian name, but as they were not part of the historical Hungary, they were not given here. As you see, Borsek, or Borsek for us Hungarians, is given in both Romanian and Hungarian languages. However, when we come to the map on diplomatic relations, it's strange enough that these 67 atlas on this map gave the capitals where there were Hungarian representatives or diplomatic representation all in their endonym form, while 20 years later in 89, which was also completed with an English explanation in the annex, it gave only the Hungarian exonym for what we had, a Hungarian exonym. But Warsaw and Warszawa or Warsaw can be easily identified, but I'm sure that Bécs can hardly be connected to Wien or Vienna by most people, well, except for our group. Again, on the diplomatic relations, that was an interesting and somewhat controversial figure in the atlas, because the places where Hungarian representatives operated were given in international transcription, although not quite, let's say, correct. But look at Dimashq for Damascus, Al-Qahira for Egypt, Athena for Greece on the right side. But there was one exception, that is Moscow, which was not given in international or transcription, but it was rewritten according to the Hungarian phonetics. I indicated with a dotted rectangle on the right. An interesting map or a list in the 89 edition, which was the time of the democratic transition or the beginning, that the atlas published a summary of those publishers in Europe that released or published books in Hungarian. And many of these books were not pro-communist or pro-Hungarian government publishers, first of all, say in Germany, or in Austria, some were considered not friendly publishers by that time in the Hungarian officials. Here again, a change of the place name usage, because formerly always gave first in the maps the endonym and then in brackets the Hungarian name. Here they just converted the sequence of the two names, and it is always the Hungarian name first, which already somehow could, I think, forecast the future principle used in the national atlases. Now, as for the translations and the maps, the controversy between them, the geographical names, first of all, the names of physical features, were translated into English, particularly the generic part of the name, and in some cases also the attribute part of the specific name. But to give you 3 examples that I'm sure could cause some difficulty for the foreign readers to find them on the map, the Bükkaj or Bükkforland. Well, if you know that there is a Bükk Mountains as well, you might be lucky to find it in the map if you read Bükkforland, well, once with capital F and once with lowercase f in the description. As for the Dunati Szakasza, which gives about 1/4 of or 1/5 of Hungary's complete area, territory, it has got a name, and traditionally a name like the Danube-Tisza interfluve. This term interfluve, well, had quite a long life in Hungarian publications. Whenever I met native English speakers, they often raised that interfluve is not really a word that describes what you mean in the map. Interfluve has a much, or covers a much smaller area than 1/3 of Hungary. So later this will be changed. I will come back to that. Okumenia in English, which is in fact a Latin name for a large part of Hungary, for Nagykunság, this was probably impossible to find it in the map without any explanation. Now, about the inconsistent translations as well, I wouldn't say that I was responsible for the place names. About more than 30 years ago, I was one of the co-workers for that, but somehow the coordination was not perfect, that everybody should use the same word for the same feature. We were already talking about that in the 89 as well, before publishing it, but we had no time to coordinate it and standardize the name usage, although we all recognized this kind of discrepancy, because we wanted to, or the publishers wanted to release it by the time of the International Cartographic Association's World Conference in Budapest in 1989. And it just came out of press on the day when this ICA conference, World Conference, was opened in Budapest. So this was a bit prepared in a hurry. This explains why some of our names are or were translated differently, such as the Dunántúli Közép-hegység. Transdanubia is okay, this has been widely accepted, except that we have to explain that Transdanubia is not west of the Danube, but to the east of the Danube, because the Hungarian aspect is from the center of Hungary, from Pest or from the lowland. But the term, the generic term középhegység, it's a really special Hungarian term that cannot be really translated, or if translated, it's almost nonsense in English. It will also be changed. Now, in this case, that I will show you later on, was changed following my suggestions. Now, let us jump to 20 years later, 2009 and 11, when in the Onomaps series, the Hungarian Geographical Institute, which was already led by Professor Károly Kocsis, who will be also the editor-in-chief of the new National Atlas of Hungary, he introduced new principles, or began to introduce new principles. These two atlases can be considered as the test atlases before starting the real National Atlas project. And what did they test? They tested also the Hungarian institutions, contributors, cartographers, and also some institutions in the neighboring countries with whom we can work together, or who are ready to send information for us. So that was a kind of a test project, which was a great success indeed. I made some comparison between the English and the Hungarian editions. First, the Hungarian edition was published 2 years later, but it was already extended by about 20%, with lots of maps, but not only of Hungary, as in the former two national atlases, where Hungary was like an island in Europe, I mean, cartographically an island, but it already included several maps that showed Hungary in European or Central European context. However, it included, again, nothing on the names or on the principles of how the names were used or placed in the maps. But it had already showed several changes to the former national atlases. Well, in the English language edition, well, the language was English of everything, even of feature names, if they had an English name. If they didn't have an English name, then we used the local name, where that feature is located, or was located, or still is located, but the generic elements of the name were translated into English. For instance, in the first one, in Megyek Mountains, in this name, the mountains is not a translation, but an addition, just to give information on the name Megyek, because in Hungary, we only have Megyek because everybody knows it. Just like Balaton, we never had Balaton, that Lake Balaton, because everybody knows what it is. However, when we come to Lake Velence, yes, it is a translation, and not only a translation, but we follow the English way of using the generic term lake, because it's usually in front of the specific term. If a river was shown in the neighboring countries like Hron, which is Garam in Hungarian, then the endonym in Slovakian was used, or like Mureș over in Romania. On the Romanian parts, it was the Romanian name. As for the city names, there were very few city names that had an English variant, such as Belgrade in Serbia, or Vienna in Austria. In all the other cases that had no English name, we used the endonyms used in Romania, such as Cluj-Napoca, Košice in Slovakia. However, the problem of identification of some features remained. So here we also had some inconsistency, partly because there were several translators working for this pre-National Atlas project, but it was only present in a few cases, like down here, Octalet Mountains, and instead of karst, which has now been unified as karst in the new editions. But the main problem could be the East Main Canal, which cannot be compared to Keleti Főcsatorna, where every word in Keleti Főcsatorna is a word that almost nobody in Europe can decipher, that it would be the same as East Main Canal. Well, the only thing is that's in the east of Hungary. So there were some problems like that, but I was responsible to collect these discrepancies. Now, shortly on the Hungarian edition of the same atlas, but 2 years later, it's 4 Hungarians. The principles were all, not the 4, but in fact the principles used here, which were not described here, but which were used here, are exactly the same as the one in the new National Atlas after 2018. We had formed several principles, as we agreed that the Hungarian names beyond Hungary, also beyond the Carpathian Basin, so over historical Hungary, if they have a Hungarian name, these names are considered as part of the Hungarian vocabulary or of the national culture, particularly because we had a really rich historical, literary, and artistic connections with places well beyond Central Europe. Here I gave you a few examples that we widely use in Hungarian. In Hungarian only, these names are used. And we also agreed in a kind of a mission that historical atlases are not enough to keep the heritage, the language heritage, the names for the future, or unfortunately also for the present generation. It's very much needed. A few extracts from that here, just to illustrate the idea of the editors. Here, the name Bratislava, yes, the local name, the endonym in the English edition for the Slovakian capital. Also Žitný Ostrov for the English readers, the Slovakian endonym. However, in the Hungarian edition, we only used Pozsony, and for Žitný Ostrov, we used the old Hungarian name Csallóköz, which is a large flat island in the Danube. Žitný Ostrov and Csallóköz are not translations at all. They are both independent names. In the Northeast, the English and the Hungarian names might very much differ. Therefore, the English reader, we do not make them the problem of identifying the Hungarian names when the description is in English. Look at the Ignis mountains in Romania and the Kőhat, the Hungarian name, Kőhat meaning stone ridge, one which is again not a direct translation. The one on top in blue rectangle, Verecký hágó, it is translated into Ukrainian as Verecký, but the word hágó, which means pass, is already in English as the generic element. Well, this is a very important place name for Hungarians because this was the pass where the first Hungarian tribes or groups arrived in the Carpathian Basin towards the end of the 9th century. A great change is that not only in Transylvania, but over Transylvania, that is in Moldova, east of the Carpathians, the Hungarian names were used or sometimes revised. Piatra Neamț became the Hungarian Karácsonykő, where there are no 10%, less than 10% of the population can speak Hungarian, but it's a name that we know. As we said that even in Bécs, well, just a few percent can speak Hungarian, but in the English edition, in the Hungarian edition, we use the Hungarian name. Bákó. It's again a name where a Hungarian minority lives, or maybe only used to live, in blocks. Probably this is the most well-known, most known name over the Carpathians, which has a Hungarian name for the center of the Csángó Hungarian people. Well, the same is true for the southern parts. Here I would talk about only one point about the Fruška Gora, which is, well, in this map in Serbia. We revived the old Hungarian name Tarcal hegység. The HG is for mountains. Although we didn't use this name in geography, but those who were farming with vines, or producing wine, they always used this name, Tarcal hegység, for Fruška Gora, as this has been a historically famous wine-growing area in Hungary. But diplomacy, again, which always lacked some consistency in the past. Well, in the English language edition, it's just natural that all place names were in English. If they had an English version, Munich, for instance, is in English, Copenhagen, and so on others. Cluj, no. Well, it's in Romanian, and it is not Cluj-Napoca here, although it would have taken too much room on the map, although Cluj already was named as Cluj-Napoca. In the Hungarian name, everything is written according to the Hungarian phonetics. For instance, Kolozsvár for Cluj. Now let's get to the new National Atlas. The natural environment from 2018, both in English and a separate volume in Hungarian, and the other one is on society in Hungarian, társadalom. So our statements. First, it was a decision by the editorial board, first of all by Professor Kocsis, that the maps and the analysis of maps, the description accompanying the maps, should not only present Hungary, but a wider area, to place Hungary in a wider geographical context. And not only a geographical, but also in a historical context. Therefore, not only the present situation, the present data are shown, but also from the past of Hungary, where we could collect the data from the region. Here I mention that the partner institutions in the neighboring countries were very good collaborators. The problem was not mainly by collaboration, but by the simple fact that the grouping of their data was not always, or usually sometimes, were not in harmony with the with the Hungarian grouping of data or the collection of information. In the introduction to the atlas, the editor-in-chief thought it very important to make it clear what the difference is between the Carpathian Basin and the Pannonian Basin. Because also in political life and geography, the Hungarians used to sometimes this, sometimes that. And we geographers and cartographers wanted to make it clear what they cover. The Carpathian Basin shown by hatches, and the Pannonian Basin is really the basin. The Carpathian Basin is bordered by the mountains, as it's explained not only by this figure, but also by the text. The Carpathian Basin, for us, but without any irredentistic connotation, is the same as historical Hungary. Why the Pannonian Basin is a geographical term, really the lowland, mostly the lowland area between the chain mountains around the, well, within the chain mountains. We confirmed that the mother tongue vocabulary includes all Hungarian names, independently of the number of Hungarians living there. The introduction also gave a pleasing sentence to geographers, because they always did a lot to use the Hungarian names and to distribute, popularize the Hungarian names as part of the Hungarian image. The novelty is, compared to everything before, that the place names, regardless of state borders, are always in Hungarian. And sometimes we use endonyms, but only on condition the scale allowed us to do so. It happens rather rarely, but if we had enough space, room, we added also the endonym. Also, a novelty was that the volume included not a names index, but rather a list of Hungarian names and to what foreign place names they correspond to. This is following each volume. This is the last chapter, so everybody can easily identify these Hungarian names with the endonyms. Sometimes several endonyms, because large regions may extend over 2 or 3 countries. For the foreign readers, the introduction was somewhat different. We consider that we do not simply have to translate the Hungarian introduction for foreign readers. Therefore, we emphasize that it offers more than just Hungary, but a wider neighborhood. It was just evident that we give the names in the official language of the country. Or if they have an English name, we use that, but those were very few. The novelty is that, and this is what received international attention, that in areas beyond Hungary, where the minority share is about 10% or above 10%, in this case, also the English maps will give the Hungarian name. This is something like considering them as endonyms. Well, for Hungarians, we really sometimes we consider them as endonyms, although the population share, I would say, only 10%, but we thought that 10% is not only, but is something, or it already has a weight. Now, a small detour to the Hungarian Act on the Nationality Names in Hungary. In Article 6 of this article from 2011 in Hungary says that where the population registered in the last census is 10% at least, then the inscriptions, the labels, and everything, including place names, including the names of institutions, the local government shall ensure that they appear in the minority language as well. There is one point here, which I didn't put here, but it has to be requested by the minority self-government or by the minority people. If it's requested, it has to be accepted. And it's an addition, the use of the minority names in Article 18, that they can freely use their geographical names or other designations in their native language. And the equivalents of the English place names, or the place names in English, including the feature names as well, are also corresponded to the endonyms at the end of each volume. What are the main merits of the English language editions? First, it's a great asset for geographers that the English language terminology, geographical terminology, first of all, for the whole of Hungary and the broader region has been standardized. And if it's done, then we could reach that no name variants appear. Well, the endonyms and exonyms are not considered name variants in this case, but there can be no translation mistakes in the names. Maybe there are, but there shouldn't be any. So each name has only one variant except for endonym exonyms. Serve as a compass, as a handbook for those, I mean, not only geographers or cartographers, but also historians, archaeologists, or ethnologists, and nobody knows for whom, that the names are standardized in these atlases. And one of the greatest merits of this publication is that in Hungary, we have already several schools, grammar schools, where certain subjects are taught in English. Also in German, we have such schools as well. But I met several geography teachers, and in my past 20 years, I was responsible at the university for training the geography teachers for the bilingual schools. And although I set up a kind of a vocabulary, but for most teachers, there was no geographic names vocabulary. And the problem was when they were teaching Hungarian geography in English. So they very often used different terms for the same object or for the same region. Just that I showed you at the beginning of my presentation for the Trans-Danubian range, for the mountains sometimes, or sometimes they use Lake White or White Lake or White Tor also, well, which is a mixture of English and Hungarian. So I have a great collection of these contradictions. Now, I show you some summary tables. First here, I'll show you the Trans-Danubian Central Range and others, how they appeared in the English language editions, starting from 89, because in the first 67th year National Atlas, there was nothing in English. But after that, you see that in the same National Atlas, there were, well, I put here 3, but in fact, there were in the 89 edition 4 variants of the Trans-Danubian range. And finally, we agreed in 2018, and I'm proud of it, that we composed a name which really expresses that it's a range of low mountains or high hills. It's really a range over several, say, 200 kilometers or even more. So it expresses also the morphology in some way. The Danube-Tisza interfluve has recently been replaced by the term Midland, because it's really between the Danube and the Tisza. Now, I'm happy to learn that now I have met this newly created term in some geography papers as well, which is a nice effect of the National Atlas of Hungary. Or as for the Tiszántúl, which is a compound word, area over the Tisza region. But this is not a geographical name. There were, in the 89 Atlas, 4 variants, I would say, for experiences to give it an English name. And we agreed that all geographical names that are written into one word, although compound names, they are not translated. They might be explained if very much necessary, but we should keep these Hungarian names also for the international readers, particularly on the maps. If you put longer explanatory geographical names on the maps, then it destroys reading. Now, comparative tables. This is part 2 of my presentation, and the final few slides follow, where I give you examples of place names use in practice. They are not really maps, but will be tables, comparative tables. On top, you see the name written in blue, in blue background in white letters. It gives you the names and the endonyms according to the national language of the country where this feature is located. Well, you have heard the name Wien Beach in Vienna several times during this presentation. You can follow the process, how we arrived at the 2018, say, practice. Where down there, Beach and Wien with an asterisk shows the asterisk that in places where the scale allowed, we gave the endonyms as well. The same with Pozsony and Bratislava. However, when we come to the English edition of the 2018 edition, you see Berehove, which is in the Ukraine, and Beregszás, because in Beregszás, the number of Hungarian nationals is above 10%, well above 10%. So these were the settlements. Now we come to other features. Well, the Danube, although the Danube doesn't flow through any English language country, but the name Danube is given for the English readers. In the Hungarian language editions, we gave Duna also for in those areas where the Duna or the Danube River was outside the area of Hungary. Csalókaz, or Zsitny Ostrov, I was already talking about. But the last one, which is so to say, the third group, I hope the different colors for the first, second, and three group come out on your screen. So Zsitny Ostrov, and because in that area, on that very big island of the Danube, the population reaches 10%, or well, above 10%. Therefore, in such cases, not only the settlements, but also the physical features were given also in Hungarian, in this case, in parentheses. Fruška Gora, up there you see it in Serbian script, like Berehove, a Ukrainian script. As I mentioned, Tarcal-hegyek has been revised for Fruška Gora, while the Duna-Tisza-Közel Danube-Tisza interfluve, which has got a much more descriptive name, Danube-Tisza Midland. It helps the orientation of the reader as well. And again, the Gergyó Mountains or Gyurgyev Mountains in Romania, but only Gyurgyev is in Romania mountains in English, because in that area, substantial Hungarian minority lives, not only in the towns, but also in the villages. Well, kind of summary figure for you, where the upper map and the lower map are basically the same, but the difference is shown in the names. In the upper map, everything is given in Hungarian. You can say it in, well, I just indicated 3 cities here. If you look at Komárom on the right bottom, where you can see 2 dots or 2 symbols, 2 signs for Komárom, because it's, I would say, a twin town, also a town in Hungary with the same name. Well, originally they were the same town with one name, but the Slovakian name for Komárom is Komárno. But here in the upper map, in the Hungarian edition map, as everything is given in Hungarian only, then we have 2 dots or 2 symbols, but 1 name. On the map extract below, Vienna in English, and because there is room enough there, Wien is also given. But Bratislava will remain the Slovakian endonym because it has no English name. It has got a Hungarian name, but the share of Hungarian people in the population of Bratislava is well below 10%. So no Hungarian name was given for the English language edition. However, when we come to Komárom or Komárno, both names are given. Komárno for the Slovakian part, and Komárom, I might say, for both parts, if I want to be precise, but in fact it refers to the Hungarian name of Komárno as well. 2 examples of the names list at the end above you see how the Hungarian names were corresponded to the names used in the country, in the concerned country. You see that the Hungarian alphabet has at least 4 or 5. Here we have 5 versions in 4 languages, or 6 languages maybe. Yes, yes, in 5 languages. As for the English versions, or at the end of the English volumes, we gave the names in the respected languages. For instance, the Alps, the name is given not only in German, because it's in Austria, but also in Slovenian, because a large part is in Slovenia, but also in Hungary, because the forelands, or the lower mountains of the Alps are also, they also extend to Hungary. Or Bukovina, which is a historical name, but a part of it is in Romania and another part is in Ukraine, so therefore both names are given. I think that this was a most correct solution to do this. Now, about the international recognitions of the Hungarian National Atlas, of the new one, the very first volume of the National Atlas that was published in 2018 received the first prize in Tokyo at the International Cartographic Exhibition of the World Conference of Cartographers in Japan, which made us very proud, not only because the content was great, but also and original, but also the execution of the atlas is really pleasing. And when I say pleasing, I was a bit reduced in praising the quality atlas. The second volume on society, which was published 3 years later, well, we plan to publish the volumes in every 3 years. So in 2024, we are expecting the 3rd volume. So this received another prestigious award where the professionals gave their vote on the exhibition, and there the society volume received the audience award, the popular award, although there were almost 400 entries on which they could give their votes, and the National Atlas of Hungary society volume became number 1. Well, there is another, say, international recognition going to this atlas. Thank you for inviting me to this event, where I could give a presentation on this unique publication, the National Atlas of Hungary, partly on the cartography and mostly on the place names. And I thank you, Peter, and also Katalin, for asking me to do this presentation. And, well, these are the publications I was talking about. Thank you very much for joining this session.
Thank you very much, Gábor, for this most interesting presentation. And inviting you was really meant as a recognition of you and of the National Atlas of Hungary, which is really a wonderful piece of work, I would say. And I think also this lecture now was very interesting. It's mainly because of this very interesting comparison between the different atlases, which represent different points in time, different political environments, so to say, and to see which place name use prevailed in a certain period, under certain political circumstances. was very, very interesting. For me, especially this revival of exonyms was very interesting between 1967, where exonyms were banned, so to say. This was under strict communist rule at that time, the high phase of communism, and communism always banned exonyms. They were regarded as they were demonized as expressions of nationalism and so on. And the Atlas of '89 then shows a revival of exonym use, so to say. This was very interesting for me to see. And perhaps also a remark on Moldova, on the Romanian Moldova. These Hungarian names are perhaps the result of Hungarian population, of the Django population. The Django population was quite numerous in earlier times. Today it is a very small minority, but it populated the larger area as far as I know. And these Hungarian names result from this earlier Django population, as if I am correct, perhaps you can correct me. Well, before I open the floor for a general discussion, just another question, a question from my side. How would you correlate in a few words, so to say, the place name use in these atlases with political developments? How would you correlate these two variables, so to say, place name use on the one hand and political situations, political developments on the other? Thank you.
Well, as far as I know, there were no questions like, why do you do this? Which is a great achievement of the past 30 years in Central Europe. Because formerly, as you correctly said, that the system tried to avoid using Hungarian names for foreign or outside areas, although in everyday speech, but also the press used it. But what was most important as a symbol of friendship, that we put the endonyms on the first place, even in school atlases. For primary school children. I think that this was widely accepted, also with appreciation. And what we also did, so just an addition, that the Geographical Institute sent a copy of the Hungarian edition, or maybe two, but one at least, to every school in Central Europe where there are classes where Hungarian is taught or where the language of teaching is Hungarian. So when we talk about the volume on natural environment, almost a third of the printed copies, as far as I know, about a third, went to schools, because we not only put it down in writing, but we also try to really to do it, that they have at least a source. Maybe many of those Hungarians, including children to fathers and now also grandfathers, maybe they didn't know the name in Hungarian, even in their environment. Now, we thought it important as well. But this would have been unimaginable before the 1990s. That's sure. I know that, Peter, you understand that. The name from the neighbor country. But we think that this could be set as an example for other publishers, that you can do it bravely. We encourage them to do so. As far as I know, the Slovenians did something very similar, that they thought it very important to have the Slovenian names for everything in the Slovenian atlas, and also introduced the Slovenian names. I don't know what limit they had for the population share in their foreign language atlases as well. So that's a great success, also a political success.
Yes, yes, certainly. Yes,
Yeah.
of course. When you recommend English exonyms for Hungarian features or develop new English exonyms for Hungarian features like Trans-Danubian range, this can always be only accommodations because it is always in the hands of the receiver language of English in this case to define the exonym. So of course, this is a very welcome recommendation, I think, also from the English speaking side. But it can always only be a recommendation, of course.
Well, probably it's more than a recommendation. This is what we hope, because the scientists writing about Hungary, very often they use Hungarian sources or sources written in English by Hungarian authors, because very often these are by the locals. So can be easily considered more reliable than the problem might be that when they meet Trans-Danubian range, they do not know that this is the same that was used in 4 variants in the past. So not only schools and teachers profit from this English versions, very carefully edited English versions, but also hopefully publishers. I can also think of, say, tourist guides, although they are more reluctant to read the National Atlas of Hungary, but it could be useful. So popularizing the names in English for Hungarian features cannot only be done by the National Atlas, it should also be the responsibility of Hungarian authors writing in English, and maybe they can add in footnote that this is the same, that what it used to be, this and this.
Yes,
I only hope that the range and Midland and words like that will be used, not only by Hungarians.
Yes, thank you. Well, let us open the floor for a general discussion now. Are there any questions or comments on Gábor's paper? I have a question in the chat by Friedrich Jeffy. Thank you for the presentation. I would like to ask whether in the atlas edited during the previous political system, it is covered by communist names of the cities indicated on the map, such as Stalinváros for Dunaújváros. Thank you. So once again, I would like to ask whether in the atlas edited during the previous political system, the communist names of the cities indicated on the map, such as Stalinváros or Dunaújváros. Thank you.
Yeah, well, that's a good example. As the first national atlas comes from 1967, and we had already forgotten Stalinváros by that, it appears only, the name appears only in journals when writing about the past. And of course, we have a collection of the former school atlases, which use the name Stalinváros, Stalin city, and that was changed to Dunaújváros. Unfortunately, I wouldn't say that I would have preserved Stalinváros, but the town, which is now known as Dunaújváros, had a beautiful Hungarian name, like Dunapentele. So why hadn't it received back its original name but got a third name? So within about 20 years, or less than 20 years, it got three names. An old name, a name after the Soviet Union's leader, and the third name, which is an absolutely created name. It's a Duna Újváros, new town on the Danube. But there is no old town on the Danube. And usually we like to have them in partnership. Upper, lower, west, east, high and low, and new and old. This happened also to Leninváros, which was again changed.
And the return to the former name Dunapentele was not considered, was not under consideration. To return to the old name, this was not under.
No. Just like for Tiszaújváros, for Leninváros, which is again a very mediocre name. So, well, it sounds great, so beautiful according to the Hungarian sound system and phonetics, but it is not a descriptive name. Well, I wouldn't say that every name should have some descriptive character, but we had a Tiszaszerkén for hundreds of years, but it has also been changed from Lenin. So Stalin and Lenin were not very lucky with us, neither with others.
Yes. Well, are there any other questions or comments? Please, Ryan, you have the floor.
Oh, thank you. Well, that was fascinating. Thank you very much indeed. It seems to me a very gentle way of standardizing place names. That may not have been your intention, of course, but the question is, do you have any legal protection for place names in Hungary?
Yes. In Hungary, we have the National Committee on Place Names or on Geographical Names, of which I am a member. And place names, not only settlement names, can only be changed if this commission approves or supports the request.
Right.
Most of well, as for the settlement names, if they want to change the name of a settlement or they unite two settlements and they are looking for a new name, we give that. So we only have our stand whether it's okay or not, or we recommend it or not. But it is, I think it is only the president that can approve it. So it's now rather a scholarly and a political process. It is not easy to change these names. Most of the names that we are dealing with in the National Committee of Geographical Names is about the street names, the names of newly established, districts away from or newly established railway stations, or new bridges, because Hungary has been linking the neighboring countries with newer and newer bridges. And sometimes we receive very strange ideas, or sometimes we receive very good ideas. And for instance, about the naming the bridges, we only accept those bridge name changes, or we receive or accept the letter for or the request for giving a new name to a bridge if it comes from the minister or the vice minister itself, himself or herself. So this is already kind of a filtering that we do not receive politically or linguistically very, very poor names. So we have control. And we also have the National Gazetteer of Hungary. And a friend, Peter, you surely remember Gábor Mikesi, a new PhD in Hungary. He's the owner or the manager of this place name Gazetteer, and he does it at a very, very high responsible standard.
Thank you very much.
Yes, are there any other questions or comments? Perhaps from my side, a last comment or question. It came into my mind that if English exonyms are used for transboundary features like Danube or Adriatic Sea, wouldn't it be good to add the endonym with Danube, for instance? You're on the map of the larger area of historical Hungary or of the Carpathian Basin. There is Danube in the Austrian part, in the Austrian section of the Danube, but you cannot find the local names, so to say, Donau. And in the Slovakian sections, is also Danube, but not Dunaj. On the Hungarian section says Danube, but not Duna. On the Romanian section says Danube, but not Dunaria, and so on and so forth. And also with the Adriatic Sea, it's the atlas is showing the Croatian coast of the Adriatic Sea. Wouldn't it be good to add to the exonym Adriatic Sea also in brackets Jadrans Comores, Croatian as a Croatian endonym? It's always good, I think, to know the endonym in addition. What is the local name?
Yeah, there was a discussion about that. Now I just checked the English language atlas. We say Little Danube, which is in Slovakia. So not Dunaj. And we do not even give Donau in German in the Austrian area. Yes, it is Danube as well. Because he said if in the Hungarian edition we give everything in Hungarian, no endonyms. Well, if only we don't have a Hungarian name, we follow the same principle with the English edition. But there was some discussion about that. But this was the final decision.
It needs always a final decision, of course.
Yeah. The exception is Wien as a capital. But I don't remember if Belgrade is given also as Belgrade in the.
I think it is given also in as Belgrade, yes, with the endonym version.
Yes. I'm sorry. Yes, Belgrade is also given.
It's also given. With settlements is always given, the endonym is always given, but not with transboundary features like Danube or Sea, Adriatic Sea. Yes. So if there's no other question or comment, then once again, Gábor, thank you very, very much for your fine lecture. Very, very interesting. And perhaps we'll see each other in Helsinki at the ICOS Congress.
I know about it, yeah.
Or in Dublin at the IJU Congress. So thank you once again. And thank you all, the audience, all the colleagues and friends who were listening to this lecture. You are also invited to next lectures of ICOS and this lecture series. The next is already next week, and you can find the title of these lectures on the website, on the ICOS website. So we have still a series of lectures before summer, and of course we will continue in autumn then. So thank you once again and have a good time. Goodbye.
Well, I thank you for invitation. Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye.
Goodbye. Goodbye.